Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Adam EBERHARDT. I'm Deputy Director of the Warsaw-based Center for East European Studies at the University of Warsaw. And I'm honored to chair the session today, which is, the topic of the session is challenges of the labor market in Ukraine, mobilizing human capital for sustainable reconstruction. Well, indeed, the topic is quite topical, I would say. It is, our session focuses on really a central issue and central challenges for Ukraine's recovery, how to rebuild not buildings, not infrastructure, but how to rebuild human capital amid displacement, demographic crisis, demographic losses as a result of the war, ongoing military needs, emigration. This is really the question we would like to discuss. Well, I would like us to discuss not only how can we get people back to Ukraine, but in which way we could work on the critical skills that are needed in Ukraine, also to somehow identify what are the critical skills that are needed in Ukraine for the sake of reconstruction, but also as a factor of economic resilience, which is also extremely important. Certainly when we discuss reconstruction, we are not talking about after-war reconstruction, we are talking about fast-track reconstruction, about everyday efforts of Ukrainian government and Ukrainian society to build back better, to build Ukraine back better, and this is something we will be discussing. Let me start with introducing our panel. So we are joined by Svitlana KOVALCHUK, who is the Executive Director of Yalta European Strategy, a leading platform shaping strategic discourse and strategic dialogue on Ukrainian's future for many, many years. First started in Yalta, later on in Kiev, and we hope to get back to Yalta. Svitlana focuses on reform processes and building strong international partnerships. The second speaker is Bogdan ZAWADEWICZ, a long friend of mine from Warsaw, who has the Geopolitical Risk Analysis Office at the Polish State Development Institution, which is a BGK bank. Bogdan is in charge of assessing global trends and strategic risk. His work explores how geopolitical dynamics affect financial institutions and development projects. Bogdan is also very much engaged in many BGK bank projects which are related to Ukraine. Olena TANASIYCHUK is the president of the Charity Resources and Public Initiative Funds in Chernivtsi, which is implementing programs supporting vulnerable and war-affected communities. So it is really, really great to have a person among us who has an extensive experience in social development and humanitarian assistance at the regional level. Great to have you, Olena, here at the panel. The next person to join the session is Anya ABDULAKH. Anya represents the Ukrainian diaspora in United Kingdom and works with Ealing Community&Voluntary services. She specializes in refugee integration, community support, and strengthening local civic initiatives. Also an important topic to look at Ukrainian diaspora in Europe, well, I wanted to say in European Union, but not only in European Union anymore, but let's say people who decided to leave Ukraine to UK. There are many Ukrainians. There are also many Poles who have been staying there for the last 15 years or so. and it is really interesting to learn your perspective of the topic. And last not least, Mr. Osamu HATTORI, who is the chief representative of the Japanese Development Agency. It is Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA, in Ukraine, in Kiev. Osamu-san oversees Japan's development cooperation portfolio and supports projects aimed at recovery and resilience. Okay, well, there are five speakers in our panel. We don't have much time, so probably without further delay, I would be willing to ask the questions. Please be brief. So if you are brief, maybe we will have some time to engage the audience, or maybe we will even have opportunity to discuss with each other. Let me start with a question to Svitlana. So given your work with the Yalta European strategy, how do you assess the potential of returning migrants to Ukraine and the Ukrainian diaspora to bridge skills gaps to accelerate knowledge transfer during reconstruction? What could be done, and what should be done, and how and what are the prospects in this regard?
Thank you very much for inviting me to this very important conference, especially in Romania, in our neighborhood country, and to this very important panel, because it's panel about future and also panels about today. I will be coming to your questions very soon, but I would like to start and ask our audience just to imagine situation. You don't sleep the whole night because your neighbors just launched 36 missiles and 600 drones against you. Its situation exactly happened on November 29 in Kiev. Then you wake up in the middle of night, you run to the shelter, it's actually the closest metro station. You don't sleep, around 6:30 you are back. And you don't have time to rest, you need to be ready to the office, and you need to start to your normal working day. Because, of course, our soldiers are fighting on the front line, and everyone in Ukraine should fight at their places. Because without economic resilience, we will not save our country, and it matters. Of course, it's very important to bring all Ukrainians back who are now abroad, but there are also many Ukrainians who are still in Ukraine and who are really fighting for all economic resilience in Ukraine. Based on the statistic, now in Ukraine we have around 24 million citizenship, and around 10 million are now abroad. Of course, it's a big question for Ukrainian government how to get people back. And it's not easy question, because based on international experience, international practice, around 30% of people are coming usually back. So it's a big number. And when we're speaking about Ukrainians who are abroad, most of them, around 75%, are very well-educated Ukrainians who actually, during 4 years, started already their life abroad. And it's really challenging how you can get people back. For example, I have a lot of friends who live abroad in London, in Berlin, in Paris, in Rome, and they got their job. Their children started their education abroad. And I recently was in London, and I was really surprised that my friends speak with their children in English. Because children left Ukraine when they were 4 and 5 years old. They even don't know adults wording in Ukrainian. They joined English children garden, they joined English school, so they even speak English, and they even thinking in English way. And this situation is very common for people who are staying abroad. Of course, many Ukrainians, it seems to me, based on the statistic, still around 30% continue to work for Ukrainian companies, because we have to be very adaptive in Ukraine. We cannot work on usual conditions that everyone can go to the work on the daily basis. We need to adapt to the real situation, because even now we have a big lack of human resources, but still around 50% of Ukrainians who are abroad started already, they work in international companies. And it's real questions how to get them back to the country where you cannot secure their safety. For us, it's like situation I described, just to wake at night and run to the shelter. It's something what becomes normal. I understand that it's normal that I'm describing that it's normal, but it's okay. We spent the night in shelter, then we came to the office, and what we are discussing with our colleagues, we are still alive, we are happy, let's celebrate life, let's work as hard as we possible, because we understand what we need to do as much as possible today, because you don't know if you will have tomorrow, yeah? And can you imagine people who already used to live abroad to come back? Will be it safe in Ukraine? We don't know. Will be able to sleep at night? We don't know. Of course, ideal situation will be if the real peace will happen, as Ambassador Ildem mentioned in his panel discussion, first panel discussion. But there is like no guarantee that real peace is going to happen. What is going to happen if we will reach like ceasefire? For how many years? Nobody knows. And of course, situation in the economic sector of Ukraine is very frustrated. You cannot like secure your future. Can you imagine you used already to the secure and stable life in Germany, for example, with all social benefits, with stability, and you are coming to Ukraine, you don't know. For example, I don't know when I will be back if I still have my apartment. Will I have place to live? Okay, if I will have, I will be happy. If no, I need to be creative. Of course, my friends will host me as all Ukrainians are doing now. So, coming to your question, how to bring Ukrainians back. Recently, Munich Institute did real research and asked 3,200 Ukrainians if they will be ready to come back. And actually, rates of people willing to come back differs from 3% to 45%. And more people will be ready to come back if Ukraine will retain all territories started from 1991. We all believe that it's not going to happen. Unfortunately, it's something I need to say in this room. Next very important topic, they will come if Ukraine will receive real security guarantees, especially if Ukraine became NATO member. Is it going to happen? It's also a big question. Of course, my president, my government is doing everything possible and impossible to get real security guarantees. But again, there is no guarantees that all the security guarantees will be real. And of course, third very important topic is and point if Ukraine economic will be stable. Will be Ukrainian economic stable? I'm not an economist, but even I can say, of course not, because we will be country after the war, and economic situation will be very complicated. So, speaking about the percentage of people who will be ready to come back, it will be lower. I believe it will be even lower than 30%. What is international standard. And of course, even now, Ukrainian government is working to bring in Ukrainians back. They started already some grant programs. You can apply on the DIA web application for getting some money for starting small and middle business in Ukraine. There is special platform where you can start to look for a job. Of course, Ukrainian government is in a negotiation with big European institutions to create a good platform for bringing Ukrainians back. But first point for everyone to come back will be physical security. And its main questions which should be answered and delivered. And of course, it's not on the shoulders of Ukrainian government, but it's on the shoulders of now our international projects. And we, as all public institutions and Ukrainian government will do everything possible and impossible to get as many Ukrainians back as possible. And of course, we will try to work with Ukrainians who are abroad, because it's also very big resource we shouldn't underestimate. Important to have Ukrainians at home, but also it's important to cooperate with Ukrainians who are abroad because they are big assets. So it's everything will be in developing, and everything will depend on the security situation of Ukraine. Thank you.
Well, okay, thank you very much for rather a grim picture, but I have even a grimmer question, because one could envisage a situation where the war is over and the border restrictions are lifted, and men who are staying in Ukraine these days because they are not able to leave, they decide to emigrate in order to get a better paid job somewhere in the West, or in order to join their families. Yeah, so this is also a factor which should be taken into consideration when planning the situation for a post-war Ukraine, right?
Absolutely. And of course, we developing such scenarios as well. And of course, Ukrainian government is working on securing very good job positions for men who fight it and for men who are staying in Ukraine. Because again, it's nice to be abroad, but still it will be also important to participate on the rebuilding and reconstructions of Ukraine.
Yes,
and it's also questions of values. Are you staying in Ukraine? And I still believe even if you spend 4 or 5 years at country at the war, you would prefer to stay in country and continue to work for your country.
Okay, question goes to Bogdan ZAWADEWICZ of the BJK Bank. From your perspective, from the point of view of the analysis you prepare, how can Ukraine turn demographic crisis, demographic decline, and labor shortages into a framework that still attracts investment necessary for long-term reconstruction and development of Ukraine? How can we overcome the demographic crisis and make Ukraine an attractive place to invest?
So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this question. So I'm going to make an argument that some of you actually may find it controversial. So I will start with the statement that instead of thinking of all these negative demographic consequences and the way that Ukraine should address these issues, maybe we should more think about accepting the new social reality and start thinking about how the new economic model should be adapted to this social reality. Because this actually, again, shifts our attention. So it brings us from thinking how we can handle, how we can provide some incentives for refugees to return to the country. Then there's a whole discussion about security guarantees, uncertainties, so on and so forth. How we're going to address the issue of war veterans, traumatized people, disabled people, so on and so forth. So maybe instead we just think about the reality on the ground. What kind of human resources are at the state disposal, and how should we construct and define the economic model to build up on what is available. I know it's kind of controversial, but also I believe it's quite realistic. Because, I mean, if you look at the research on the immigrants, also on the refugees, I lived for many years in the Balkans, for 7 years. It's also the region which experienced war. Also, there was a huge part of the population that fled the region and never returned. And despite all the international assistance, financial assistance, all the efforts, the NGOs and the other international organizations that were engaged in supporting the reconstruction of those societies, I mean, the results are, let's put it like, not spectacular, let's put it this way. So what I'm trying to say is that let's accept the reality and focus on the economic and institutional solutions. And this is probably the best way to address these issues. Because, if you think about refugees, I mean, I said about the research. So research says that basically after 2 or 3 years, there are very little incentives for the refugees to return to their home country, no matter what incentives, support the government, the state is about to provide. And also now from our Polish experience, we see all those our Ukrainian friends settling down there, and with the time passing, they are getting more and more integrating to the system, right? They are buying properties, taking mortgages, sending their kids to schools. So there's more and more factors that actually keep them to stay in Poland, right? And we cannot force these people to return to Ukraine. So let's think about them as a sort of Ukraine's asset. How actually Ukraine can benefit from having such large diaspora abroad? How can these people contribute to the future economic growth of Ukraine? Again, maybe let's think about the ways how these people can be used, right? And when I think about that, we have plenty of Polish companies, right, interested in stepping into Ukrainian market. Of course, most of them looking forward to the end of the conflict, when there are certain risks will be mitigated. And I believe that our competitive advantage will be the Ukrainian people who live in Poland, who are socialized in our system. So this is just an example, and let's look and think about more in a synergic way with regard to Ukrainian diaspora. Also today, if you look at the current account, Ukraine's current account, you see how significant, how important are the remittances, that's the money transfers from Ukrainian diaspora to Ukraine. They're important for the survival of the whole economy, right? It's about, last year it was about almost $10 billion US. So that's one thing. Then thinking about this new model. So Ukraine is going through this rapid process of the institutional and legal convergence with European Union. This will require new skills, new type of investments in human capitals, new sort of institutional and capacity building processes. Our institution is also involved in this process. 2 years ago, we established the program, like training program for young Ukrainian professionals, where we train them in the field of development banking. Now Ukraine, in next month, is about to launch its own development institution. This is just an example, and we maybe also should continue as the international community to continue our efforts on investing in human capital in Ukraine. Also, when we think about our financial instruments, the way that we directly support Ukraine financially, we see that one of the major obstacles is the deficits of certain competences, let's say in the municipal sector, and we primarily target SMEs and municipal sector in Ukraine, and then we see this competence gap, and we try to also kind of provide technical assistance to fill this gap, and these are kind of daily things that we work on. They all refer and are related to the demographic challenges. But as I said, let's kind of acknowledge the reality and think about what could be done now and what is realistic and what is feasible. Thank you.
Well, yes, thank you, Bogdan. Well, you mentioned remittances. Well, but remittances is probably something that works for the first 2 or 3 years. Later, when the links are somehow broken, when the family members, parents pass away, then this factor does not influence, and it is not a factor of growth. It is a factor of just sending aid as some kind of support. Well, I'm just wondering, maybe we are asking a wrong question. Maybe those people are not coming to and will not be coming to Ukraine, and maybe what should be the plan for Ukrainian recovery and reconstruction would be to get open, for instance, for migrants from South Asia, for instance. Maybe this is a solution to the problems we are facing today.
That could be the solution if you think about the economic model in a traditional way. What I was trying to say is that if you have the certain limited human resources, you have significantly smaller human resources than before the war, try to adapt your new economic model to those resources. So maybe let's shift from the industrial sectors towards the service sectors. Think smartly, like about how we can somehow adapt to that. So that's one thing, because I think that bringing this story about bringing the immigrants from Asia, you know, I'm not sure whether they will be incentivized enough to come to Ukraine. That's one thing. Another question concerns the remittances. What we know from other parts of the world, where there are countries which are at risk and which have large diaspora, the support, the financial support from diaspora is quite constant. This because they know that it's not just a matter, you know, of family ties, supporting the families, but it's also the matter of survival of the state. Probably Russia will probably not disappear. This Russia as a sort of threat will be there for many decades ahead. Hopefully it changes, but we can actually assume that will be there. So therefore I think that, you know, looking at the Ukraine diaspora, how well organized it is, how many associations were created, how people are mobilized, that there will be certain constant level of financial support for transfer from diaspora to the Ukrainian state because of this Russian threat.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. Well, Olena, I would like to pass the floor to you and ask you to share your experience from the regional level. How does the situation look like in Chernivtsi? Well, I assume that Chernivtsi is probably a region where a net internal migration is positive, where many people from eastern Ukraine have moved to, but still, as we know, it is a challenge. Is it?
Щиро вдячна, дорогі колеги. Я хочу трішечки внести поправку, оскільки...
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. I would clarify that our foundation was set up 17 years ago in the Chernivtsi region. But in order to better cope with challenges, now we are active nationally. So I can give you the regional as well as national perspective. I'm happy to speak to you as a representative of Ukrainian civil society. We are active in various fields, providing also advocacy services as well as others. Today I would speak to you about training adults, working with veteran men and women. We also work to rebuild the communities on the front line. We in the Chernivtsi region as well as nationally work with the people who were most affected by this war, thinking that this is the public that can contribute to rebuilding Ukraine. I will give you a few figures. You may be familiar with the context, but I would like to stress that we currently have 4 to 6 million internally displaced Ukrainians. 70% of these are women, and we also face migration out of the country. A large part of the country is mobilized. We have a deficit of human resources in many fields, including those linked with the future reconstruction of Ukraine after the war. We have 800,000 to 1,200,000 veterans. Over 60% are aged 31 to 55. These are people ready to learn, to work in order to rebuild Ukraine. However, and at the same time to rebuild their communities. We also work with the communities in order to reintegrate veterans and internally displaced persons. We are working hard with these people. It takes a lot of effort on our side, especially psychological and social efforts. There's more and more need for reskilling in view of reintegration. A lot of women as well as men are a key target audience for rebuilding Ukraine, because these veterans, both men and women, are brave and always demand social fairness. They are highly motivated to rebuild Ukraine. These persons are coming back with incredible skills. They are capable to make decisions on the wing and in crisis situations. And these are qualities that we seek in the reconstruction of the country. But their reintegration is challenging. In our experience, we would say that the key to success consists of trust and involving them in decision-making. All of these, together with effort and support, especially in the form of grants, can perform wonders. I would also refer to another category that we work with. This is an invisible front, namely the wives, the family members of the military and of the veterans, also internally displaced persons, women taking care of families years on end. Often they had to move from one region to another in Ukraine, and they support their husbands fighting on the front line. And this makes them less likely to be able to reskill or work or open a business, even though they would like to do that. I think that their economic involvement would lead to a higher success. Our foundation is running a project in the Chernivtsi region where we work with women who are family members of the military, trying to develop various projects in order to involve them in developing greenhouses or other agricultural work. They are very active, have ideas, and are agents of change in their communities. These target groups are no longer vulnerable, and perhaps that's the category of persons that will be supporting the future Ukrainian economy. We have trained over 800 veterans, both men and women. Most of these are women whom we have trained, and consequently 120 businesses have been opened in various sectors. We already know from experience what we can bet on. There are reskilling or upskilling programs for veterans and their family members. These programs can take from 6 weeks up to 8 months. these actions deliver short-term results. We aim for grants in order to train these people. We have communities locally who require such trainers and resources, and we channel them to those places. To end, I'll give you the example of Tatiana, who moved from Donetsk to Kherson, and she had children with special needs. She received 2 goats, a bit of training from us, and then she was able to draw some funds. She opened up a small farm and started to produce dairy products, and she registered her trademark. Another example from Chernivtsi, a family who purchased a tractor. Vitalia, a veteran, after 2 years of frontline fighting, went back to his village, and after undergoing training and a grant project, managed to purchase a tractor, and he is now farming, and that's a success story. This program is not just about money and economy, but also about strengthening communities. On social platforms, we see women, beneficiaries of our projects, showing solidarity, helping one another to evacuate Bucha, a traumatized city. We see how people support one another, and that yields visible results. Ukraine fights now not just for territories, but also for its human resources, because when people report get training and support, then they contribute to economic development. Thank you.
Z zoru waszego regionu, jakim czynom może takie krajny jak Rumunia czy Polska?
Perhaps countries like Romania or Poland could help reintegrate veterans. How could they do that? Do you have projects in the Chernivtsi region where you come from? I think that there could be several ways to provide such help. In my experience, I know that the German government provides such help, also Romania, and there may be other countries doing it. These are mentorship programs or micro-grant projects, so there's a huge potential to set up workshops for various crafts so that our veterans can come to your countries to train, to learn various crafts, because this is well developed in Romania, and they can take that experience to Chernivtsi and develop businesses.
To the topic of Ukrainians coming back to Ukraine, and from your perspective, working with the Ukrainian diaspora in the UK, what obstacles and what incentives do you see for Ukrainians abroad who consider returning, and how can reintegration mechanism be strengthened in order to achieve it?
Thank you. And thank you for having me here. Am I?
Yeah.
Okay. I think before coming to recommendation, I think it's very important to do 2 things. One is to actually know who are the refugees and what they want. And I think the same as Olena was saying, actually listen to the voices of people you want to work is important. And the second point is what Bogdan was referring to, see what other countries who've done similar experiences, what actually seen happen. And if I'll talk about the UK refugees, which I'm sure will be similar to European Union as well, that If you see, which is not surprising, 65% of adults are women and 28% are children. And I'll tell you why it's important later, but also 68% are working. They're employed. They might not be happy what they're doing, but they're employed. And the recent kind of questionnaire showed that 69% of people who are abroad want to stay there even if the war is finished. And the main reason they quote is the better job opportunities. And if you look at the factors, what are the factors that make you decide to stay and to go? If you look at different academic works from previous countries, they're talking about basically 5 factors. It's the time, as Bogdan was also saying, the longer you stay, the less factor you stay to, you want to come back. And statistics for previous 53 conflicts that you undone, 1/3 of refugees only coming back. After 5 years is a critical period where people do come back after it becomes harder and harder. Then the second point, your situation in the hosting country economic-wise, your situation in the country you want to return, also the national identity and the family links. And that's very important coming that 28% of children, those are the most, let's say, under the risk of losing this connection, because if you grow up in the country, you become much more assimilated. And the last point is actually ECA's kind of system of housing, health, education. And because these are women who are going to come back, for them it especially matters because they usually care about your child, and so the ecosystem around the return is important. But also if you look at the previous countries' experience, for example, we're talking about the remittances. You said that it's a short-term thing. Yeah. Bosnia and Herzegovina, 30 years after the war, remittances 10% of GDP. It's still a big chunk. And what Bogdan is saying, also agree that remittances is actually a longer-term benefit. And if you see what happened with Bosnia, they had 2.2 million refugees during the war. After the war was finished, there was a different way of policies. Germany, for example, sent everyone back straight away. Only 10% of people left in the country. Sweden, Denmark, they allowed more flexible approaches, said you can go see the country at home and then decide if you want to stay or want to come back. So there was like look and see approach. At the end of these different programs, and there were programs in between, still after this, all the different programs, majority of people re-entered back out of the country. Now 50% of Bosnian population lives abroad. So no matter how you try to force solutions, people find a way out if they don't want to stay. And for me, the conclusion out of it, that there are 3 main conclusions. Number one, that Ukraine has to adopt from day one the attitude of dual strategy. You want to make people to return, but you also want to work with diaspora. You want to make sure diaspora is prospering and also work on this reputation that you're not a second-rate citizen if you decide to live abroad. Ukrainian citizenship should be something that stays with you for all the life. You're proud to be Ukrainian, even if you live abroad. And the better off you're economically abroad, likelihood you are going to help your country longer term as well. Remittances is one way, also direct investments. And again, multiple countries from Bosnia to Ireland actually working on diaspora, bring a lot of economic value to the country. So I think this is a very important aspect, and embassies can do much more to actually have this proud be Ukrainian should be no matter where you live. And I think especially for young people who spent now 5 almost years in the country abroad, they have to remember they're Ukrainians and a lot of work to be done about it. Also, I think second very important aspect is that the flexibility. I think it's much scarier for someone who lives 4 or 5 years outside the country to say, I have to burn my bridges and come back to Ukraine, to allow more flexible return paths. And I think examples can be, there might be opportunities for younger people to do job placements in Ukraine if they have Ukrainian passport, or if you have particular skill shortage, you can do a kind of a term contracts for this person to come back to Ukraine. The chances that things work out and they stay is high, but if they just push there, it gets more anxiety and they're not likely to apply. So I think flexibility of this approach is very important. And the last point, I think what is important is to understand that when the person wants to come back home, they don't want to come back to Ukraine in general. They come back to specific town, to specific city. So the importance of local authorities and the importance of organizations like Olena is doing, that is local grassroots organizations that provide you this network support. And we see the same with Ukrainian refugees back in London. What works for people integrate better, that we have the programs that cover 6 kind of your areas. You provide support with employment, with housing, with education, healthcare, community, which is very important. Forget about it. People want to know other people when they move back. They want to have professional network, social network. So create these communities locally is very important. And keeping this Ukrainian identity is very important. So this is the work to be done on Ukrainian side, to make sure people come back not to the country in general, but specific communities. And I think these are the areas that have to be focused going forward.
Great, thank you. Well, just to finish our discussion on remittances, you know, I'm a bit afraid that the situation in Ukraine and in Bosnia and Herzegovina might be different because of a type of a family connections. So probably in Bosnia you have much more traditional model of families than in Ukraine, but we may discuss it after our panel. I have one additional question to you when we are talking about Ukrainians living in UK. Well, do Ukrainians there, do they tend to stay connected with each other, and how do you assess your engagement in supporting Ukraine? How loyal, what is the level of solidarity among Ukrainians in London, in Ealing?
And I think it's incredible. I've been in London for 20 years. I haven't seen so many Ukrainians cultural events. We have demonstrations. We have a lot of grassroots organization, a lot of big funding beyond, but I'm on probably about 25 WhatsApp group, different projects. The community is very strong, and that's what I think people forget, because being in Ukraine is so stressful because of the war and because of all the stress that is there, that Ukrainians outside Ukraine still feel proud, and for various reasons people left, and you know, you cannot judge if the women decide to move with their kids for the safer area, if they could do it, and I think that's very important to see. People do feel very patriotic and very Ukrainian, but again, personal safety and personal economic freedom is a factor, right? It doesn't reduce your patriotic feeling. You just think about your children, and it's a kind of factor to understand. But it is incredible to see that I hear probably, before I used to hear mostly when you go on the tube, on the underground, like Italian, now you hear Ukrainian all the time. So it's a very visible community.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And last but not least, the question goes to Mr. Osamu HATTORI from JICA. Well, probably we all know how large and how efficient JICA is. There are a number of projects where JICA is engaged in Ukraine. Also, there are some projects, for instance, linking JICA and BGK Bank in Poland, so there is also a strong cooperation in this aspect. My question to you is quite obvious. To which extent you engage yourself in the projects which are not related to infrastructure, for instance, but which are related to human capital?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for having me today, and it is a great honor to join you at this forum and to be a part of this important panel. So as Japan's development cooperation agency and as a practitioner deeply engaged in the field, in the country, so I'd like to share our perspective on recovery and reconstruction in terms of the human capital investment. So when we talk about recovery and reconstruction, we often imagine bridge, power grids, and buildings. But the true foundation of the recovery is the people. Their skills, their confidence, their commitment, and their ability to lead change. So Russia's full-scale invasion has displaced millions, drained critical talent, and fractured communities. If we fail to address this human dimension, so no amount of concrete or steel will secure Ukraine's future. So at JICA, our conviction is very clear. Recovery and reconstruction must be human-centered. It must restore lives, not just the structures. And it must create opportunities for Ukraine to lead its own recovery while inviting global partners, including JICA, Japan, and to learn and grow together. So let me start with challenge. Consider the scale of disruption. The millions are forced to flee, thousands of schools damaged or destroyed, entire regions stripped of essential services. There are not just the numbers. They represent lost learning, interrupted career, and a weakened social fabric. This is not only a humanitarian crisis, it is an economic one. Without the skilled people, reconstruction stalls. Without the inclusive growth, stability flutters. So now let me turn to our approach. JICA's response combines equipment provision for emergency response, capacity development, and knowledge sharing. Three pillars that turn recovery into a platform for resilience and investment. We began by restoring the essentials, not only generators for hospitals, but also decentralized power units for municipalities, schools, and shelters, critical to keep communities functioning during blackouts. We secured a water system to ensure safe drinking water and delivered heavy machinery to clean rubble and reopen transport routes. And because safety is the first condition for recovery, we launched the humanitarian mine action, providing clearance equipment and training to remove explosive hazards from farmland and residential areas. But hardware alone is not enough. So we invested in the skills and education, equipping 85 digital learning centers with laptops and STEM kits, ensuring 1.6 million children could keep learning. We supplied 1 million textbooks to restart the classroom and launched the vocational training program for displaced youth, linking them to real jobs through partnership with Japanese companies. In health, we supported mobile diagnostics unit and rehabilitation centers for veterans, because reintegration into society is vital as physical recovery. So, and we are mobilizing the private sector also through JICA's business partnership program. Now more than 10 Japanese companies are engaged in areas from renewable energy and construction to ICT and food processing, creating jobs and technology transfer. In vocational training, we are piloting PPP models with Japanese firms to link skills development directly to employment opportunities. This is not only reconstruction, it is market creation. So these efforts are not charity. They are strategic investment in human capital, the most valuable asset for Ukrainian futures. So next, knowledge sharing and mutual learning. It's a unique activities for JICA. So this is not a one-way street. We do not come with ready-made answers. Instead, we co-create solutions with Ukrainian partners. Through invitation program to Japan, we bring central and local leaders to see how Japanese municipalities managed community return after the Great East Japan earthquake in 2011. How they rebuilt the trust, restored services, and planned for resilience. These exchanges empower Ukrainian leaders to adapt lessons to their own context. And Japan also learns a lot. We learn from Ukrainians' remarkable resilience and the speed of its digital, technology, innovation, and also its ability to maintain the governance and the fire. This is why we call it mutual learning. Reconstruction becomes a shared journey, strengthening both nations. We believe this approach builds ownership and leadership in Ukraine, essential for sustainable recovery. And it reduces risks. Skilled workers, functioning infrastructures, and stable communities are the bedrock of any viable project. So reconstruction is not just a moral imperative, it is an economic opportunity if we invest in the people first. So the reconstruction is more than rebuilding what was lost. It is about creating a future that is stronger, smarter, and more inclusive, build back better. By combining a human-centered recovery, strategic partnership, and mutual learning, we can turn Ukraine's tragedy into a blueprint for resilience worldwide. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much. Well, and it's really an impressive list of JICA engagement in Ukraine. And what I truly believe should be cherished is a partnership between Japanese companies and Japanese institutions and Central European institutions like in Poland or Romania, when engaging in Ukraine. Okay, you know, I'm a bit puzzled because according to agenda we have just 4 minutes left, and according to the script over there we have 14 minutes. So well, maybe we should be flexible somehow. If there are any questions, we will stick to the screen notice. If there are no questions, I will stick to agenda. Who is willing to ask a question? No one, so maybe any one of you would like to comment? I can't? Okay, yeah, at the back row.
I wanted to make sure we all stay here for 14 minutes, so that's why.
Okay.
That was just a joke.
So once you say 14 minutes, you are obliged to offer
speak.
A question.
Exactly. So my name is Alexander Dogan. I work for the International Organization for Migration. So I was very interested in all the topics that were discussed by the panel. I was so encouraged by your messages from the human-centered aspect, from the local level support within Ukraine for veterans, for IDPs, for host communities. I think those messages are really well received. From IOM's perspective, I want to share that there are experiences, of course, worldwide of trying to channel remittances into useful channels of development. So there are examples of that, of how we can encourage and work with diaspora to make sure that these sizable amounts are not just or not only to support families back home to survive, but at some point during the recovery process that they can also be put towards the greater goal of development of Ukraine. So there are examples of that, and there are ways of framing policies and frameworks that we can explore with Ukraine. So that's one positive message that I wanted to share. I had one question about, I work for IOM, for the Migration Agency of the UN, so obviously my question is going to be about migration. I noted maybe subtle differences of opinion in terms of what Ukraine will require in terms of workforce for reconstruction, for recovery. So one aspect will of course be a share of the people will return. They will return home, they will return to Ukraine. That is what always happens. Another share will remain in host countries. But if we listen to, for example, an intervention from an earlier panel that said, we need 5 million workers in Ukraine just for the reconstruction part, that is not a number that will be filled by returning Ukrainians. So regardless of how you look at the question, I wanted to ask the panel, how do we respond to that reality of these projections? That is a sizable number that needs to be filled somehow, and what policies could be in place that we already work towards preparing the grounds for Ukraine somehow using migration to fill that need for their recovery. Thank you.
Great. But that brings us back to the question of immigration policy of Ukraine.
Can I just quickly reply to the question? First of all, those projections are based on extremely optimistic assumptions. These assumptions say that Ukraine will be able to regain the control over all Russian-occupied territories, because the costs of the so-called reconstruction, 80% of this cost apply actually to those territories, or the territories which are next to the front end on the Ukrainian side. Given the current circumstances, we can hardly forecast any kind of investment processes taking place there in the near foreseeable future. So maybe Ukraine will not need that much workforce. That's why I said that maybe we should start thinking differently about the reality, about also the future model. And my argument actually is that we should shift from the so-called labor-intense economy towards the economy which requires much less workforce, because we know the labor shortages, the demographic situation, you know, all those things. and try to think about Ukraine more in terms of modernization than reconstruction. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone willing to ask a question? Okay, so well, maybe I will use the opportunity because, you know, I have the feeling that we keep talking about a number of people in Ukraine, but the biggest problem probably is not a number of people there, but it is an age structure. So it is a problem that you have more and more pensioners and people who are unable to work, and a lack of young people who are extremely important when it comes to investment, when it comes to development, when it comes to modernization of Ukraine. So I would like to somehow turn your attention to the problem of age structure, not only to the problem of the number of people there in the country. Svitlana?
Yes. For sure, we have this problem with age structure, and Ukrainian government is trying to address it. For example, now a lot of people who were already on the pension are calling back to their work, and they are really very helpful, and they are trying to do what they can do. Of course, there is another also program that many people can do work online, remote work, from whatever they are, I don't know, in India, in London, in Paris, in Romania. And Ukrainian government trying also to think very creative, and as colleagues told also that we are trying to change a structure and make division of workforce more efficient. It means that one person can do several works, and also since the start of the war we have a lot of program to change the profession of Ukrainians who are staying now in Ukraine, because there is like a big demand of people in security areas, in IT areas, and a big demands on the manual workers. And we have many programs to enable people who did another work or who were unemployment to start this new job. And again, yes, a lot of people who are in another age are now calling to that job.
Mm-hmm. Anyone willing to take the floor? Please.
I have a question, actually, probably mostly to the ladies. How do you assess the readiness of Ukrainians who stayed in Ukraine to accept those who will be coming back?
I think we will be happy to welcome everyone who will be back to our country.
Anyone willing to take the question?
Можна?
Yeah.
Я би хотіла також підтвердити, що ми готовність суспільства є, хоча
our society is open and ready to welcome those who return. But the latest focus groups we read in our country show that locally we are waiting back home those people who left Ukraine. There are many incomplete families in Ukraine, so the answer is yes.
From people who live abroad, I think it would be good to see some also positive PR about this return. I think it's an important part that central government can do to change this more obvious for people that they are welcome, because it's not a clear message yet. So that would be the point as well.
Okay, great. I think we deserve coffee break. Well, I would like to thank the panel for joining me today and for discussion. And I think, well, it is good that we keep discussing about a human factor, about people, because, you know, when organizing conferences on rebuilding Ukraine, people tend to focus usually on, you know, all this infrastructure and connectivity and, you know, and energy and other topics, while the most important aspect of any modernization is people. And people is something that we should focus on, and we should design smartest way to get them engaged in the future of Ukraine. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much for your patience. And we are meeting at 5 o'clock for the next sessions. Enjoy coffee. Thank you.